Torpedo, starboard side. The Japanese officer's scream shattered the calm of the night as an explosion ripped through the black waters of the Pacific. Flames shot into the air and men stumbled across the deck in panic. Out of the shadows, something small, fast, and deadly darted past. It wasn't a battleship. It wasn't even a destroyer. It was one of America's Mosquito Fleet PT boats striking under cover of darkness. Before we move further into this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear. Let's dive in. For months, the Imperial Japanese Navy had dominated the seas with massive carriers, towering battleships, and fleets of cruisers. Their steel monsters were symbols of power and intimidation. But on this night, they faced something they weren't prepared for. Tiny wooden boats, barely visible against the dark horizon, armed with torpedoes and nerves of steel. The Japanese sailors peered desperately into the night, their searchlights sweeping the waves. But the PT boats were ghosts, skimming the surface at lightning speed, their engines muffled by the roar of chaos. Another torpedo slammed into a cruiser, splitting the silence with a deafening blast. Panic spread across the Japanese formation. They hadn't even spotted the attackers before being struck. The PT boats had been mocked by some as toothpick torpedoes. Barely 80 feet long, made of plywood, they had no armor to protect them. One good hit would turn them into firewood. Yet in the hands of daring crews, they became a nightmare for the enemy. Moving swiftly under the cover of night, they could sneak through narrow straits, ambush convoys, and vanish before anyone realized what had happened. On board one American PT boat, a young lieutenant clenched the wheel, eyes locked on the dark silhouette of a Japanese destroyer. His crew held their breath. At any moment, a searchlight could expose them, and enemy guns would tear them apart. But the lieutenant remembered Pearl Harbor. He remembered friends lost in the early days of the war. This was their chance to strike back. "Steady, steady," he whispered. Then, with a flick of his hand, he gave the order. Fire. The torpedo tubes hissed, streaks of death slicing through the waves. Seconds later, impact. The destroyer shook violently, flames erupting from its side. Cheers erupted on the PT boat, but there was no time to celebrate. Enemy gunners opened fire wildly, shells splashing into the sea around them. The lieutenant slammed the throttle forward, the boat bouncing on the waves as they weaved into the dark, vanishing like phantoms. To the Japanese, it was unthinkable. How could such small boats humiliate their powerful navy? But the truth was simple. The PT boats used speed, surprise, and sheer audacity. They weren't built to trade blows with giants. They were built to sting, to bleed the enemy, and to remind them that no ship was safe. Many nights, Japanese convoys moved nervously, their sailors glancing constantly into the blackness, terrified of the next strike. PT boats turned the night into a hunting ground. And though they were small, they carried heroes. One of those heroes was a young lieutenant named John F. Kennedy, whose PT-109 was rammed and sunk in the Solomon Islands. Against impossible odds, he saved his surviving crew, dragging an injured sailor for miles through shark-infested waters. Stories like his turned the Mosquito Fleet into legends. On this night in the Pacific, as the Japanese ships tried desperately to regroup, the PT boats slipped away into the shadows, their work done. Behind them, the glow of burning steel lit up the horizon. The enemy had been struck not by massive fleets or towering guns, but by men in wooden boats who refused to back down. When dawn broke, the Japanese Navy scanned the seas, shaken and humiliated. The PT boats were nowhere to be seen, just whispers on the wind and the wreckage of ships. That had seemed untouchable only hours before. The PT boats never carried the weight of battleships, but they carried something far greater. The courage of men who fought with nothing but speed, cunning, and the will to strike back. They proved that in war, size doesn't always equal strength. Sometimes it's the smallest predators that deal the most unexpected blows. Never underestimate the small and the underestimated, for in their shadows, they often carry the sharpest teeth. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and drop a karma in the comments below.